Nolan West groaned as the automated wake-up sequence flooded his cramped hotel room with harsh artificial light. The sound of ventilation systems sputtering to life seemed deliberately designed to prevent him from returning to sleep. His head throbbed, a souvenir from last night's overpriced synthetic whiskey at the Stellar Drift Lounge. Lights to 30%, he mumbled, and the room's basic AI complied with a mechanical beep. The Wayward Orbit Hotel sat at the furthest edge of Centauri Station, a once thriving spaceport now reduced to a shadow of its former glory. Years of corporate neglect had transformed it into a haven for those who preferred minimal security and even less paperwork. For a former military pilot with a dishonorable discharge and a reputation that preceded him across 3-star systems, it was perfect. Nolan dragged his muscular frame from the bed, catching his reflection in the smudged mirror. At 36, his face had collected scars like some people collected souvenirs, a jagged line across his left cheekbone, a smaller one splitting his right eyebrow. Dark stubble shadowed his jaw, and his brown hair hung just long enough to break any remaining military regulations. His eyes, a penetrating steel blue, reflected a weariness that sleep couldn't cure. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since the tasteless protein pack on yesterday's transport shuttle. Room service, he called out to the room's rudimentary AI system. Whatever passes for breakfast in this place. Breakfast option available, the synthetic voice responded. Delivery in 15 standard minutes. Payment will be deducted from your account. 15 minutes gave him time to shower, a luxury after 3 weeks crammed in the cargo hold of a smuggler's vessel. The water pressure was pathetic, but it was hot, and for a moment Nolan closed his eyes, letting it wash away the grime of travel and poor decisions. Clean and wrapped in the hotel's threadbare robe, he checked his personal communicator. The message from his contact was still there, coordinates for today's meeting where he'd finally unload the data chip hidden in the false bottom of his travel case, information that certain parties would kill for, and others would pay handsomely to obtain. The door chime interrupted his thoughts. That was fast, he muttered, tucking the communicator away. Enter. The door slid open with a mechanical groan, but instead of the service drone he expected, a figure stumbled through the doorway and collapsed onto the floor. Nolan's combat instincts flared. In one fluid motion, he retrieved the pulse pistol from his discarded jacket and aimed it at the intruder. Don't move, he ordered, voice dropping to the commanding tone that had once directed squadron maneuvers through asteroid fields. The figure stirred, revealing itself to be female, but definitely not human. Her skin was an ethereal shade of teal with delicate gold markings tracing patterns along her exposed arms and neck. Instead of hair, a crown of crystalline appendages framed her face, catching the room's dim light and refracting it in hypnotic patterns. She wore what appeared to be the tattered remains of a once elegant jumpsuit. She raised her head, revealing almond-shaped eyes with vertical pupils like a cat's, their color a mesmerizing amber that seemed to glow from within. Please, she whispered, her voice melodic despite the evident pain lacing it. Help me. That's when Nolan noticed the blood, or rather, the iridescent blue fluid seeping from a wound in her side. What the hell? He lowered his weapon slightly. Who are you and why are you bleeding all over my floor instead of bringing my breakfast? The alien woman attempted to rise but winced, clutching her side. My name is Tylyra. The kitchen. I hid there after escaping. The service droid. I reprogrammed it to bring me to a room with only one occupant. She paused, breathing heavily. You seem the least likely to immediately report me. Flattering, Nolan replied dryly. And why exactly wouldn't I report a bleeding alien fugitive who's hijacked my breakfast order? Tylyra's amber eyes locked onto his. Because you're hiding too. I can sense it. Your energy signature, it's guarded. Furtive. Nolan's grip tightened on his pistol. You're a reader. Some alien species possessed limited empathic or telepathic abilities, a fact that had complicated more than one of his missions in the past. Not a deep one, she clarified. Surface emotions, intentions only. It's common among my kind. Which is? Veolestian. Nolan whistled low. Veolestians were rare outside their home system, a notoriously private species known for their advanced technology and powerful psionic abilities. They rarely interacted with humans, maintaining diplomatic but distant relations. You're a long way from home, princess. Something flickered across her face, surprise, perhaps, before she composed herself again. Not a princess. A scientist. Xenobiologist. Nolan holstered his weapon but maintained his distance. And the people after you? How did you? Nobody reprogrammed service droids and bleeds from energy weapon wounds because they're having a good day, he interrupted. I've been in this game long enough to recognize someone on the run. Tylyra's shoulders slumped slightly. Mercenaries. Hired by the Draken Syndicate. That got Nolan's attention. The Draken Syndicate controlled most of the illegal weapons trade in this sector, precisely the organization he was supposed to be delivering his data chip to later today. What did you do to piss off the most dangerous criminal organization in 3 systems? I discovered something, she replied, her crystalline crown dimming slightly. Something they've been hiding. A bioweapon they're developing using Valestian genetic material. She winced again, the wound clearly causing her significant pain. I was part of a diplomatic research exchange. When I found their hidden laboratory, they eliminated the rest of my team. Nolan ran a hand through his still damp hair, weighing his options. Helping her would jeopardize his delivery, possibly his life. The smart play was to call station security, wash his hands of the situation, and collect his payment. But station security was notoriously corrupt, especially in this sector. And if the Draken Syndicate was involved? Let me see that wound, he said finally, approaching her with cautious steps. Tylyra tensed but allowed him to examine the injury. The cut wasn't deep, but the edges showed the telltale charring of an energy blade. Those bastards, Nolan muttered. This was meant to track, not kill. They want you alive. Yes, she confirmed. My genetic composition is valuable to them. Something in her tone made Nolan look up, meeting those strange amber eyes. For a moment, he saw past the alien features to the intelligence and fear behind them, someone caught in a situation beyond their control, just trying to survive. I have a medkit, he said, standing. Not calibrated for Valestian physiology, but it should stabilize you until we figure out our next move. Our? Tylyra questioned, a flicker of hope crossing her features. Don't read too much into it, Nolan warned, retrieving the compact medical kit from his travel case. My business on this station just got complicated, that's all. As he applied antiseptic gel to her wound, Tylyra studied his face with unnerving intensity. You were military, she observed. But no longer. Discarded. Like me. Nolan's jaw tightened. I thought you said you weren't a deep reader. I'm not, she replied softly. But pain recognizes pain. Their eyes met again, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that transcended species and circumstance. For the briefest moment, Nolan felt exposed in a way no tactical training had prepared him for. The door chime shattered the moment. Both froze, exchanging tense looks. Expecting someone? Tylyra whispered. Just breakfast, Nolan replied, reaching for his pulse pistol. But somehow I doubt that's who's calling. The chime sounded again, followed by a heavy thud against the door. Room service, called a gravelly voice that couldn't possibly belong to the hotel's service droid. Special delivery. Nolan moved silently to the room's environmental control panel and killed the lights. In the sudden darkness, Tylyra's crystalline crown emitted a soft glow that he gestured for her to cover. Back in trance, she whispered, dimming her natural luminescence by covering her crown with her hands. Maintenance shaft, he confirmed, pointing to a panel near the sonic shower. Standard in these older stations. Should lead to the service corridor. Another thud hit the door, the metal beginning to buckle. Time to go, Nolan muttered, grabbing his travel case and jacket. He helped Tylyra to her feet, supporting her weight as they moved toward the maintenance panel. The hotel door burst open just as they slipped into the narrow shaft, the sounds of heavy footsteps and guttural voices filling the room they'd vacated. Find them, an authoritative voice commanded. The Valestian doesn't leave this station alive. In the cramped maintenance tunnel, Nolan felt Tylyra stiffen against him. Don't worry, he whispered, surprised by his own protectiveness toward this mysterious alien woman. They'll have to go through me first. She turned those amber eyes toward him in the darkness. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. It was a good question, one Nolan wasn't entirely sure he had an answer for. His life had been a series of self-serving decisions since his discharge, each one moving him further from the men he'd once hoped to be. Let's just say I've spent too many years making the wrong choices, he replied, guiding her deeper into the maintenance shaft. Maybe I'm due for a right one. As they navigated the station's forgotten passages, Nolan realized that his simple plan to deliver information, collect payment, and disappear had transformed into something far more complicated and dangerous. Yet despite the risk, the feeling of Tylyra's slender form leaning against him for support stirred something he'd thought long dead: purpose. I was supposed to meet contacts from the syndicate today, he admitted as they paused at a junction. To deliver information about Coalition patrol routes. Tylyra's eyes widened. You're working for the Dracons. Nolan corrected. I think that arrangement just ended. Which means we're both going to need a way off this station, fast. I know someone, Tylyra said hesitantly. A smuggler who sometimes transported specimens for our research team. If we can reach the lower docks without being detected. Nolan nodded, decision made. Then that's our play. As they continued through the dimly lit maintenance tunnels, evading their pursuers, Nolan couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of the situation. He'd ordered breakfast and instead received an injured alien scientist, a squad of mercenaries on his tail, and the certain knowledge that his payday had just transformed into a death warrant. Yet despite it all, he felt more alive than he had in years. There was something about Tylyra, her courage, her determination despite her injury, that awakened forgotten parts of himself. The sound of boots on metal grating echoed from somewhere ahead. Nolan pulled Tylyra into a recessed alcove, their bodies pressed close in the narrow space. Her scent, like cinnamon and ozone, filled his senses, strangely intoxicating. They're blocking our path to the lower docks, he whispered, hyper-aware of how her body fit against his. There's another way, she replied, her breath warm against his neck. But it's risky. Nolan found himself smiling, a real smile, not the cynical smirk he'd worn like armor for years. Sweetheart, he murmured, I think we're well past playing it safe. In the dim light, Tylyra's alien features softened, and the faintest hint of a smile touched her lips. Indeed we are, partner. The word hung between them, weighted with unexpected possibility. As they prepared to face whatever came next, Nolan realized that his mundane morning had transformed into something extraordinary, all because room service had delivered something infinitely more interesting than pancakes. The maintenance tunnels eventually opened into Centauri Station's neglected engineering sector. Nolan helped Tylyra through the narrow opening, his hands lingering at her waist longer than necessary. The wound at her side had stopped bleeding, but her movements remained stiff with pain. Your smuggler friend, Nolan said, scanning the dimly lit corridor. How do we contact them? Tylyra's crystalline crown flickered with soft pulses of light, a response to stress, Nolan had noticed. Jace operates out of loading bay 17. He's not exactly friendly, but he respects scientific knowledge. My team's research grants gave him steady work. And you think he'll help a fugitive scientist and her new human bodyguard? Nolan asked skeptically, checking his pulse pistol's charge. He might, Tylyra replied, her amber eyes meeting his. For the right price. Nolan patted the hidden pocket in his jacket where the data chip rested. I've got something valuable, intel on Coalition patrol routes. Not exactly legal tender, but worth plenty to the right buyer. Tylyra studied him with that unnerving intensity. You were going to sell military secrets to criminals. It wasn't a question, and Nolan didn't bother denying it. Everyone's got to eat. Even if others starve as a result. Her voice carried no judgment, only curiosity. The question hit harder than he expected. Years of justifying his post-discharge choices suddenly felt paper-thin under her gaze. Look, princess. Scientist, she corrected. Not all of us have the luxury of a clean conscience, he continued. After the military discarded me, I did what I had to. Tylyra's expression softened. What happened? Nolan hesitated. He rarely spoke about his discharge, the court-martial, the accusations of insubordination and recklessness that had ended his career. Yet something about her alien gaze made him want to explain. I disobeyed direct orders, he said finally. There was a civilian transport caught in a firefight. Command ordered us to continue pursuit of our target. I broke formation to cover the transport's escape. You saved them, Tylyra observed. 37 civilians, yes. But my disobedience cost us the target, a known weapons dealer. 3 months later, he supplied the explosives that destroyed a coalition outpost. 23 military personnel died. The memory still burned. Not regret for saving the civilians, but the weight of those 23 deaths he might have prevented. So they discharged you, Tylira concluded. For choosing immediate lives over potential future threats. Military discipline doesn't allow for such nuance, Nolan replied bitterly. One bad call, and everything I'd worked for was gone. They moved through the engineering sector in silence, each processing the unexpected intimacy of the conversation. As they approached a junction, voices echoed from around the corner. Nolan pulled Tylira into a small supply closet, their bodies pressed together in the confined space. His arm circled her waist protectively, and he felt her sharp intake of breath. In the darkness, her crystalline crown emitted a soft glow that illuminated the delicate features of her face. Your crown, Nolan whispered, fascinated by the play of light. Does it always give you away like this? Only in response to strong emotions, Tylira replied, her voice barely audible. Fear, pain, pleasure, connection. The word hung between them, charged with meaning. Nolan became acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, her slender form unexpectedly warm against his chest, the subtle alien scent of her skin like exotic spice and electricity. The footsteps outside grew louder, then passed. Neither moved to break their embrace. Your heart rate has increased, Tylira observed, placing a teal hand against his chest. Fear. Nolan's mouth curved into a half-smile. Not exactly. Their eyes locked, and something shifted between them, curiosity transforming into something more primal. Without conscious thought, Nolan reached up to trace the golden markings along her jawline. What do these mean? He asked, voice rough with unexpected desire. They tell my life story, she replied, leaning slightly into his touch. Accomplishments, lineage, significant events. And this one. His finger followed a particularly intricate pattern that curved down her neck. That one is personal, Tylira answered, her pupils dilating slightly. It signifies unfulfilled potential. In what area? Nolan couldn't help asking, drawn deeper into her mystery. A hint of mischief colored her response. Interspecies relations. The double meaning wasn't lost on him. Nolan leaned closer, his body responding to her nearness with an intensity that surprised him. He'd never considered himself xenophilic, but there was something about Tylira that transcended species, an intelligence, a strength, a vulnerability that called to him on a fundamental level. Their lips were inches apart when an explosion rocked the station, throwing them against the closet wall. They're getting desperate, Nolan observed, reluctantly pulling away to check his communicator. Station-wide alerts flashed across the screen. They've triggered emergency protocols, they're using the chaos to search more aggressively. Tylira straightened her tattered jumpsuit, her professional demeanor returning despite the charged moment they'd shared. Loading Bay 17 is 2 levels down. If we use the emergency evacuation routes, we might avoid the security sweeps. As they slipped from the closet, Nolan caught her arm. This conversation isn't over, you know. The subtle darkening of her teal skin, a Veilestian blush, he realized, was answer enough. Loading Bay 17 was a hive of frantic activity as merchants and travelers rushed to secure their vessels before station lockdown. Among the chaos, a weathered transport ship stood out, not for its appearance, which was deliberately unremarkable, but for the calm efficiency with which its crew prepared for departure. That's Jace's ship, Tylira confirmed, pointing to the vessel. The Wayward Prospect. They approached cautiously, avoiding the station security patrols that had increased throughout the emergency. At the loading ramp, a burly human with a cybernetic eye assessed them coldly. Well, if it isn't the professor, he growled, recognition sparking in his mechanical eye as it scanned Tylira. Heard you were dead. Evidently not, she replied coolly. We need passage off station, Jace. Immediately. The smuggler's gaze shifted to Nolan, then back to Tylira. We're not a passenger service. Nolan stepped forward. We can pay. He produced the data chip, careful to keep it shielded from view. Coalition patrol routes for the next 6 months. Worth a fortune to someone in your line of work. Interest flickered across Jace's scarred face, but suspicion quickly followed. And why would a Veilestian scientist and a... He paused, his cybernetic eye whirring as it scanned Nolan, former military pilot, be carrying such information? Does it matter? Nolan countered. Jay sparked a laugh. It does when half the station is looking for you both. He gestured to a nearby vid screen where security bulletins displayed their faces. Seems the Draken Syndicate is offering quite the reward. Tylira stiffened beside Nolan, her crown dimming with apprehension. Jay studied them for a long moment, then sighed heavily. Get on board. But understand this, I'm not doing this for your chip. The professor's team saved my niece when frontier fever hit the outer colonies. Consider us even after this. As they hurried up the ramp, a commotion erupted at the bay entrance. 3 armored figures pushed through the crowd, Draken enforcers, their energy weapons already drawn. Time to go. Jace shouted, slamming his palm against the ramp controls. Inside the ship, chaos erupted as the crew rushed to emergency launch procedures. Nolan pulled Tylira into a secure corner as the first energy blasts hit the hull. So much for a clean getaway, he muttered, holding her close as the ship's engines roared to life. Tylira's amber eyes met his, her expression a mixture of fear and something deeper. There's something I need to tell you, she said urgently. About who I really am. The ship lurched violently as it broke free from its moorings, throwing them against the bulkhead. Nolan's arms tightened around her protectively, their faces inches apart once more. Whatever it is, he said, surprising himself with his certainty, it doesn't change anything. As the wayward prospect blasted away from Centauri Station, bursting through the containment field in a dangerous but effective escape maneuver, Nolan realized a fundamental truth: in less than a day, this alien woman had somehow become more important to him than self-preservation. The ship jumped to hyperspace with a bone-rattling surge, leaving their pursuers behind, for now. In the sudden quiet, Tylira's hand found his, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that transcended their biological differences. It changes everything, Nolan, she whispered. I'm not just a scientist. I'm the Veilestian royal heir, and what the Draken Syndicate wants from me could destabilize the entire quadrant. The revelation hung between them, heavy with implications. But as Nolan looked into her extraordinary eyes, he realized his path was already set. Whatever secrets she carried, whatever dangers lay ahead, he was all in.